just reading.
Okay.
Should we start, or what should we do?
Yeah. What do you think, Linda? Are you ready to go? Should we start, just us?
Yeah. Marianne's coming in now.
Okay.
And we're on YouTube. So anytime you want to start.
Okay. Okay, we're reading from Helen's notes, which was the conversation she had with Jesus directly before it was edited. And we're starting here today. Man can never control the effects of fear himself because he has created fear and believes in what he creates. In attitude, then, though not in content, he resembles his own creator, who has perfect faith in his creations because he created them. All creation rests on belief, and the belief in the creation produces its existence. This is why it is possible for man to believe what is not true for anyone else. It is true for him because it is made by him.
Okay.
Every aspect of fear proceeds from upside down perception. The truly creative devote their efforts to correcting this. The neurotic devotes his to compromise. The psychotic tries to escape by establishing the truth of his own errors. It is most difficult to free him by ordinary means, only because he is more unstable in his denial of truth. The miracle makes no distinction among degrees of misperception. It is a device for perception correction, which is effective quite apart from either the degree or the direction of the error. This is its true indiscriminateness. That's why it says there's no degree, there's no degrees of miracles, no degree, aspect, or intervals in misthought and separation.
Yeah.
It's all the same. Doesn't matter how much you think it is or how much you don't think it is. It's all the same. The miracle makes Christ-controlled miracles are selective only in that they are directed toward those who can use them for themselves. Since this makes it inevitable that they will extend them to others, a very strong chain of atonement is welded. But Christ's control takes no account of the magnitude of the miracle itself, because the concept of size exists only in a plane that is itself unreal. So you need the time for you need a space for the time of the miracle to occur. And it doesn't matter the size of the space or whatever time it is, it's all the same, because none of it's true. Since the miracle aims at restoring reality, it would hardly be useful if it were bound by the laws of the same error it aims to correct. Only man makes this kind of error. It is an example of the foolish consistency his own false beliefs have engendered. Both the power and the strength of man's creative will must be understood before the real meaning of denial can be appreciated and abolished. Denial is not mere negation. It is a positive miscreation. While the miscreation is necessarily believed in by its own creator, It does not exist at all at the level of true creation. The miracle compares the creations of man with the higher level of creation, accepting what is in accord as true and rejecting the discordant as false. This is why it is so closely associated with validity. Real validity is both true and useful, or better, it is useful because it is true. That's good. All aspects of fear are untrue because they do not exist at higher creative levels and therefore do not exist at all. To whatever extent man is willing to submit his beliefs to the real test of validity, to that extent are his perceptions healed or corrected. So in a sense, that's one of the things that I like to talk about when we talk about how Jesus uses his words. So we all have an idea of what healed is already, but he's associating healed with corrected, rather than what we think healing is as humans in space-time and what it applies to. He's saying that healing is the correction of error, not
That's why Ken called atonement correction.
right, because that's what we're trying to do.
Right.
We can only be what we are, and we have never been that. So what needs to be happened is we need to be corrected as to what we think we are, not changed into something that we're not, which is what most New Age teaching is. You got to change yourself into something else so you could be good, because you're not good.
I don't think other teachings teach that. I never saw that.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
In sorting out the false from the true, the miracle proceeds much along the lines suggested very correctly by Bill, i.e., if perfect love casts out fear, and if fear exists, then there is not perfect love. But only perfect love really exists. Therefore, if there is fear, it creates a state which does not exist. So this is what I'm saying. People think that there's certain things they have to do to be able to love perfectly because their love is imperfect. What this is saying is there is only perfect love. There's no such thing as imperfect love. So imperfect love is a misperception of what love is. That just needs to be corrected. You don't have to do anything special to go from where you are to perfected love, other than to correct your mind to think you are. There's no behavior that's required in order to get you there.
Right.
Believe this and you will be free. Only God can establish the solution, for this faith is his gift. But man must contribute to his readiness here as elsewhere. The readiness for faith, as for everything else that is true, entails the two steps necessary for the release from fear. Denial of fear, in human terms, is a strong defense because it entails, as is, two levels of error. One, that truth can be denied, and two, the absence of truth can be effective. Experiencing fear, which is more characteristic of Bill, involves only the second error. However, these differences do not affect the power of the miracle at all, since only the distance between truth and error are its concern. You are both more, this now he's talking to Helen.
Right.
You are both more miracle-minded and less able to recognize fear because of your stronger but split identification. Bill also characteristically is less miracle-minded but better able to recognize fear because his identification is more consistently right but weaker. Together, the conditions needed, the consistent miracle-minded consistent miracle-mindedness, the state in which fear has been abolished, can be particularly well worked out. In fact, it was already worked out before. Your idea about the real meaning of possession should be clarified. Your own denial of fear, this refers to a visionary experience of Helen, your own denial of fear introduced some error variance, but not really a significant amount. However, there is always a chance that as the size of the sample increases, what was not significant before may attain significance. So we had better get this out of the way now while you are still within the safety margin. So what he's saying is the more things happen to you, the more you believe it. So the more errors you continue to make, the less you're going to be willing to see yourself as you actually are and think that you're not that. So he says there's a point in time where, one is not overriding the other. And therefore, it's a good point to look at stuff rather than going on and continuing it, the denial of it, so that you build up more and more evidence of the denial,
Right.
rather than have the ability to see the denial as not necessary and not true. Fear of possession is a perverted expression of the fear of the irresistible attraction of God. Yes, this does apply to homosexuality, among other errors, where the whole concept of possessing or entering is a key fear. It is symbolic. It is a symbolic statement of an inverted decision not to enter into or possess the kingdom. In physical terms, what it emphasizes, because of its inherent error of soul avoidance, real physical creation is avoided and fantasy gratification is substituted. You get what he's trying to say?
Yeah.
So what he's trying to say is, if you have a particular form of error, the fear of possession is a perverted expression of the fear of the irresistible attraction to God.
Right.
So we're all attracted to God, whether we
We're
call
afraid of it.
but we're afraid of it, right? So if we're attracted to God, then there are things that attraction brings us to. And what in a male and a female, it brings a male and a female together. Okay. If you're attracted to God, but you're so afraid of it, you still have that desire to be with someone. But if you're with a man, then then you're negating the desire as it is, but in a way that it could never be fulfilled. So you're actually
Substituting. So that's why he says it's misplaced miracle impulses.
Exactly.
Really are always a desire for true joining,
Right.
that the ego takes and makes it into physical.
Right. And if you're really scared of true joining, then you attempt to join with something you can't. A man with a man, or a woman with a woman, because that's that was the idea of what sex is for. It's for joining to bring another soul.
Gay people won't like that.
That's why I know. That's exactly true.
Right.
That's why if I was saying there's some people who are not prepared to hear this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
The truth is still that the attraction of God is irresistible at all levels, because that's the only thing we're attracted, because that's what we're one with, and it cannot not be attracted to it.
Right. So what he's saying is all forms of physical are really fear of joining with God. We'd rather get physical than be irresistibly drawn into God, which would annihilate the ego.
Right. But there is a improper use of it. And that's the creative God created. Procreation, bring another soul into the world. Because then we're very similar to God, bringing souls into reality.
Okay.
So we join and we bring a soul into, and there's not as much guilt around that because we're actually mimicking God in the world.
Right.
The truth is still that the attraction of God is irresistible at all levels. And the acceptance of this totally unavoidable truth is only a matter of time. So everybody's going to come to the point where they realize what they're really afraid of.
Yeah.
Because they would have tried to get rid of the fear, and the fear is never going to get rid of. Or they really have to do the right things, thinking that they're doing the right things, and the fear is still going to be there. But you should consider whether you want to wait, because you can return now if you choose. Okay, he says to her, you are writing this with improper motivation, but we will try anyway. If you are to stop, do so immediately. So what he's telling her is, you're not doing this from the right perspective. So you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
If you continue to do this. Do you want to wait a minute until you're in a better frame of mind? Because she's looking at her attraction to Bill, and Bill's attraction to men, and her non-attraction to her own husband, and Bill's non-attraction to her because he's gay, and this is putting her in a tizzy. Possession is a concept which has been subject to numerous distortions, some of which we will list below. 1, it can be associated with the body only. So this is 1. Possession can be associated with the body only. This is one of the distortions. If this occurs, sex is particularly likely to be contaminated. Possession versus being possessed is apt to be seen as the male and female role, since neither will be conceived of as satisfying alone, and both will be associated with fear. This interpretation is particularly vulnerable to psychosexual confusion. You get that? Yeah. 2, from a rather similar misperceptual reference point, possession can also be associated with things.
Right.
This is essentially a shift from one, and is usually due to an underlying fear of associating possession with people.
Right.
Okay. In this sense, it's an attempt to protect people, like the superstition about protecting the name we mentioned before. Both 1 and 2 are likely to become compulsive for several reasons, including A, they represent an attempt to escape from the real possession drive, which cannot be satisfied this way. B, they set up substitute goals, which are usually reasonably easy to attain. So you shop a lot.
Right.
And you go shopping for stuff, and you like stuff, and you start to buy stuff, and you begin to accumulate goods. Like this with your man, accumulation here isn't going to solve the problem. They appear to be relatively harmless, and thus seem to allay fear when you're doing it. So you're out doing it, and you feel good like you're doing it. But then when you get something, it's not satisfied, so you got to do it again, because the in between, you're feeling right. You're trying to, accomplish something. The fact that they usually interfere with good interpersonal relationships can be interpreted in this culture as a lack of sophistication on the part of the other, not the self. And this induces a false feeling of confidence in the solution based on reliability, not validity. So the same thing happens over and over again. So you figure you must be right.
And ego likes reliability.
Exactly. And then it can continue to do it over and over again.
Right.
It is also fairly easy to find a partner who shares the illusion. Thus, we have any number of relationships which are actually established on the basis of one. and others which hold together primarily because of the joint interests in two. The manifestly external emphasis, which both entail, seems to be a safety device, and thus permits a false escape from much more basic inhibitions. So you're doing it outside of yourself, and you keep on doing it rather than going within to find where the real things are going on. As a compromise solution, the illusion of interpersonal relating is perceived along with the retention of the lack of love component. This kind of psychic juggling leaves the juggler with a feeling of emptiness, which in fact is perfectly justified. So it doesn't work and they're empty now because he is acting from scarcity. He then becomes more and more driven in his behavior to fill the emptiness. So, you're doing it in shorter and shorter periods of time.
Like an addict.
When these solutions have been invested with extreme belief, one leads to sex crime and two leads to stealing. So then, you're looking for partners, and then you just
Anybody.
Right, anybody will do. Or you don't have any more money and you just start stealing stuff because you think it's going to solve the problem, whether you have the money or not. The kleptomaniac is a good example of the latter. Generally, two types of emotional disturbances result. A, the tendency to maintain the illusion that only the physical is real. This produces depression.
There's no way out.
No, exactly. B, the tendency to invest the physical with non-physical properties. This is essentially magic and tends more toward anxiety proneness. So you start to call things by name, give things names and characteristics, and not just look at it. It's just an object. C, the tendency to vacillate from one to the other, which produces a corresponding vacillation between depression and anxiety.
Of which you're quite familiar.
That's right. I'm familiar with all of these. That's why I think I understand. Having tried a number of ways to solve the problem here in the world of space and time, and never being able to solve the problem. And that's just what I'm just told I'm separate. I'm all alone. I can't do this. Both result in self-imposed starvation. 3, another type of distortion is seen in the fear of or desire for spirit possession. This is really good, this one. The term spirit is profoundly debased in this context.
Right.
So what he's saying is the way he uses spirit in the course, saying you are spirit. What he's saying is there's spirits that have the ability to be, let's call it, human in how they think and are. Now, what he's saying is, as spirit, as God created us, we don't have those abilities. So that's why he says it's profoundly debased in this context, because it's making spirit into something that's not entirely, and then making spirit in the image of man. So we're debasing spirit and ourself again. But it does entail a recognition that the body is not enough, and investing it with magic will not work. This recognition accepts the fact that no matter how you do it, it's not going to be sufficient. But precisely because it does not limit fear so narrowly, it is more likely to produce greater fear in its own right. So by not limiting to just what's happening in the world, we go up a level and think that it's possible to be we go into a wider level of something unknown and give it the ability to do exactly what's happening here. So it produces a greater fear because there's more open to possibilities that we can't even know about because we don't know what these spirits even are that can possess us or how they really work. Endowing spirit with human possessiveness is a more inclusive era than either of the two, and a step somewhat further away from the right mind, which is interesting. So he's saying, yeah, you can believe in spirits, but that doesn't bring you closer to being right-minded because you're you're more wrong-minded about what spirit are. So you're more wrong-minded about what you are. So you've doubled your wrong-mindedness, even though spirit am I and nothing more can I be.
Like double denial.
Double denial, right? Projection is also more likely to occur with vacillations between grandiosity and fear. Religion is a distorted sense. Religion in a distorted sense is also more likely to occur in this kind of era because the idea of a spirit is introduced, though fallaciously, while it is excluded from the other two. So we make God into something and establish a religion where everybody believes in the same type of God, but the type of God is, based on what we're rejecting and thinking something else could be.
Right.
So we make God in the image of man
Ego.
as a larger man rather than what God really is. And then we form a religion around it because people want to believe the same thing because they want to be validated. And that's what religion does.
So should we stop there?
Yeah, it's good by me. Well, we'll stop there today. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say?
Yeah, I do. Mary Ann here. Back towards the beginning of what you read today, I've often been uncomfortable with the discussions of heterosexuality and homosexuality and feeling that there's the possibility and maybe the actuality of judgment coming through these transmissions of one being better than the other. And I can't see how that really is. I can see both can be helpful to opening to spirit and knowing who we are. And sorry, that's my phone. I can't turn it off. But I guess I have to let go of the feeling of judgment in this and ask both of you if you feel that there's judgment coming through these notes.
Yeah.
No, you know what I see it as, Mary Ann? I don't see any judgment for any of it. What he's saying is all forms of physical solution are magical. And then he explains how we use one or use another because of the hidden fear we have of our attraction to God. But I don't hear or feel any judgment about any of it. I think particularly because Bill was gay, what was the perfect, and certainly he would never add to Bill's sense of feeling excluded or judged against. I think it's a remarkable treatise on explaining how we defend ourselves with and doing it without judgment, with explanation, with what he would call right-minded understanding.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see any judgment in it.
I don't see judgment. What I see is explanation of why we function in the world as we do, based on the non-solution of the only error that there is, that we're separate from God. So at the heart of us, everybody's suffering from separation. And here in the world, we go about trying to solve the problem. Here's the way heterosexuals attempt to solve it. And here's the way homosexuals attempt to solve it. Neither is going to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that's going to solve the problem is experience our oneness with God, because there is no solution in the world being a form. The only solution is in our mind where we already pre-joined. So what he's saying is we search the world for solutions to a problem that we don't have in the world, we have in our mind, so we can never find the solution in the world. But if we turn back and look into our minds and understand why we did what we did, we can stop focusing on the problems we think we have in the world, and find the true problem and where the true solution lies.
Thank
That's
you.
the way I see it.
I think that's important to underline because of the potentiality for misunderstanding
Yeah,
what Jesus is trying to say to
Right.
Helen.
Well, you know what's interesting is I think that's one of the reasons why he told Bill that he was in charge of what gets included and what gets excluded. And it was based on the inducement of fear. So what he says is, if you think this is going to induce more fear to shut people down, then take it out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why a lot of what we're reading is not included in the course, because people who are inherently guilty already can use this to feel more guilty about it and think, like you're saying, that Jesus is judging them, because they're judging themselves and they're projecting judgment onto everything.
Thank you.
Marianne, though, you could ask your inner voice for an
Yeah.
understanding of it.
Yes.
I'd love to hear what your
That would be
voice
very
says.
cool.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the voice that you get is
Crystal
just
clear.
as good as the course,
It's
as
the
far as
Christ,
I'm
the
concerned.
voice of Christ, for
And
sure.
I think that, you know, it would be good to hear what, you know, what comes out. I'd love to hear it, actually.
Well, I think that was kind of what, you know, because of the whole cultural history around heterosexuality, homosexuality, and all the different gender ways we can identify, and seeing
Right.
them all as equally unreal. That's why
Right.
I was impelled to ask the question.
Right, and that's what he's saying. But what he's saying is the closest thing we can get here in the world is for two souls to come together to bring another soul in. That mimics God created, but it's still not satisfying in that we're not making something from nothing. We're bringing in something that's already existed. So while it feels better and it might feel right, that can't happen in homosexuality, because it's not a possibility of an event.
Well, physically, yes, it doesn't happen,
Right.
but it doesn't
Exactly.
mean that something beautiful and wonderful can happen, bringing into understanding on this physical plane through a homosexual relationship or
Oh, absolutely.
a relationship, or a relationship like where a woman has a miscarriage and is brought into contact with an extra physical presence who can teach and
Absolutely.
learn with her and their
I mean,
family.
I think that's one of the reasons why Bill was involved, because of the nature of the errors that, I mean, Helen didn't have any children, and she didn't love her husband. Bill was gay and couldn't have children and was not attracted to Helen the way Helen was attracted to Bill. So they both had a number of these errors working in them. And yet Jesus is, you know, obviously trying to tell them they don't have to change physically. They just need to change their mind about what's going on. That's what Jesus is helping them change their mind about how to solve the problem that they can't get rid of, not change their lifestyle.
Right. To ask for the inner guidance to guide
Exactly.
and surrender all the judgments and fears.
Right. To let go of your judgments about yourself and about everything else. Here's from his perspective, why things happen the way they happen.
Mhm.
If that makes sense to you, then you're a little bit, I don't want, you're more at peace with who you are because you're being understood.
Mhm.
And when you're being understood, but not asked to change, then you can sit more quietly and think about what's being given to you from Jesus.
Yeah, and let
And
the peace flow through. Let
let that peace and let
that
that understanding.
presence
Right.
manifest here.
Exactly. Exactly. And let that presence give you the answer that you can't get in the world, but you can get in the joining of your mind with the mind of a brother who knows rather than is in judgment
Mhm.
or thinks you. That's what I was trying to say about New Age stuff. A lot of New Age stuff, it's telling you you have to change before you can fulfill your function. And what this is saying is you don't have to change at all. You just got to change your mind about who you are, what you are, and therefore your function will be different entirely. You don't have to become a good person because you're a bad person. You just have to recognize that the solution isn't either being a good or a bad person. The solution is already in your mind. And the attempt to either be a good person or a bad person is an attempt to solve a problem in the world that can't be solved one way or the other.
And that you're beyond these dichotomies of good and bad.
Exactly. You're way beyond the dichotomies.
Mhm.
And stop judging yourself by them
Mhm.
because that's just what the nature of the dualistic world is. And let's get down to finding the real solution so that you can be comfortable with yourself exactly as you are.
Mhm.
That's my feeling anyway.
Which is beyond the physical and yet can shine through the physical.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, then when you have a total experience and you find out that the world isn't real in any regard, what you did or didn't do and did do, none of that has any meaning because it never really happened anyway.
Yeah.
It's just a preoccupation with what isn't rather than a preoccupation and discovery of what is. I have to put my seatbelt on.
Mhm.
So that's pretty much it. I think those were good. That was good.
Good
thing to
set
bring
of
up.
notes.
That was a good thing to bring up. I hope we got that on the tape.
Yeah,
Actually,
Linda did.
oh good,
Yes, it's being recorded.
It's recording.
oh good,
Mhm.
perfect, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Teddy,
But
Vicky.
what's good
Linda.
about it,
Oh, go ahead.
thank you guys. Thank you both. Thank you. I was just going to say what's really good is that all of them are ways we defend ourselves from just depending on God. And we just keep distractions on the outside going as much as possible. And thank God we're learning not to do that anymore. That's all.
Right. The answer isn't in the doing. The answer is in the being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the true joining.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we don't use one another, we're in communion.
Mm-hmm.
The ego uses everything and each other rather than just simply joining with in appreciation.
And it's always using everything to not solve the one problem. No matter what it's doing, the ego is attempting to keep you from solving the only problem that we have,
It
which is
keeps
the
us
idea that we're
juggling.
separate.
Right.
It keeps us juggling
exactly.
all the problems.
Uh-oh, did we lose them? I see the numbers.
We
but I
lost
don't see
them.
the picture.
Yeah. They were beginning to
Cut in and
fade
out.
in and out. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Linda.
Okay. Have
Thank
a good.
you, Judy.
Hi, Judy. We see you here.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much, all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Love you.
Love you all.
Love you all.
Love you all.
Oh, there's Vicky's back. Whoops, she's out again.